Welcome to the 2012 Candidates Forum. I'm Ann Whitman, the program moderator. This segment features candidates running for state representative in the 90th Assembly District. The format will be as follows. The first part of the program will consist of questions asked of the candidates by the members of the local media, including the Record Journal and students from Mark T. Sheehan High School. The second part will allow each candidate to make a closing statement. During the question and answer portion of the program, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. The opposing candidate will be allowed 1 minute for rebuttal. To conclude the program, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make closing remarks. A toss of the coin has determined the order of questioning. Before beginning the questioning, I would like to introduce the candidates running for state representative in the 90th Assembly District. They are Guy Darter, Republican; Mary Fritz, Democrat; Luisa Alves will ask the first question of Guy Darter.
Would you favor a change in the way the state of Connecticut lays and collects taxes? For example, would you repeal the sales tax and increase or modify the income tax?
The way we collect taxes are pretty much fundamentally wrong in most cases. With the last tax increase that we went through last year, we took out a lot of exemptions from the sales tax. One is the $50 exemption on clothes, which really hurts the lower and middle class and the seniors of the state. We're really not a function of taxes, which is the problem. It's really a function of spending, and our out-of-control spending is what's really causing the problem in the state. There's a balance always. I mean, the income tax, when it was instituted, was supposed to be a temporary tax. It's anything but a temporary tax. What we do is we bring on a tax, we spend the money, and we can't wean ourselves off the expenses. And that's really the problem that we have in the state. We are definitely a tax and spend state. That's what's happened over the last 30 years, and that needs to stop. All indications are it's just driving us into a real bad situation, as you can see by all the numbers and lack of growth in this state.
Mary?
That's a very interesting question. In 1991, when the income tax was put in place, I did not vote for it. There was a whole group of moderate Democrats who got together and tried to kill it, and we kept it from being imposed until the following December. Actually, and then another friend of mine from Waterbury, he and I went out and collected signatures to get it repealed. We got 60,000 signatures, and it still was not enough. The income tax supposedly was to solve all the problems. The budget in 2011 increased the income tax. I did not vote for that budget. If I didn't vote for the income tax in the first place, I wasn't going to vote for it again in second place. It was just not something I believed in. And to raise it on people, no, that's not for me.
Denise Perez will ask the next question of Mary Fritz.
Every year, we see a dwindling budget for the state of Connecticut. It is evident that not every program can continue to receive adequate funding to continue operation. My question is, what specific programs do you plan to cut, and how much would be saved with their elimination?
I don't believe we see a dwindling budget every year. In fact, I believe the budget increases every year, and that has become a problem. In terms of cuts, what the governor did and what was approved by the legislature a year and a half ago was he did consolidation of agencies, and in that respect he was able to reduce staff, reduce the number of commissioners and so on, and that was a savings. I think we need to look at savings as opposed to cut. I think we need to find a better way to do business, and that's what I've been about since I've been in the legislature.
Could you repeat the question, please?
What specific programs do you plan to cut, and how much would be saved with their elimination?
I think that cutting is where we need to be. I also see where we need to save. Mary talks about consolidating the agencies, and we have about anywhere between 45 and 55,000 employees, and that consolidation eliminated 63 jobs. That's a drop in the bucket. It's almost a joke when you start to talk about it. Um, the issues are, in our last budget, we have a tendency to put in programs. We don't look at them later on. I think most programs should end up where we have a sunset clause in them. So it's mandatory that we relook at every expenditure on a certain time frame. I think my time's up. Thank you.
Russell Blair of the Record Journal will ask the next question of Guy Darter.
Something that's been in the news lately, the risk reduction earned credit program where inmates can earn time off their sentences for attending classes and other things like that. Some legislators have called for suspending the program. Other people have proposed changes to it. I just wanted to get, if you're elected, what would you do with that program as it is now?
I would hope they would suspend it today, and I would vote to eliminate it. It is ridiculous of the people that we're letting out. We're letting people that are violent criminals back out onto society. They don't belong in society. We've already had 2 people that have been released under this program that have committed murders. And really, the program is a bad program. It was a bad program at the beginning. And I know my opponent, Mary, she voted against the actual piece of legislation, but she also voted against all the Republican amendments that would limit the amount of people that could come out under different categories, whether it was manslaughter or sex offenders. So absolutely, I would eliminate it. I would hope they would stop it today. And when we get into session, I would vote to eliminate the program. It's a bad law.
Russell, it's true that I did not vote for the program. I would be very happy to eliminate it. I believe it was not well thought out. I don't think they looked at it in the long range of what the possibilities could be. And I suspect that these past 2 murders that have taken place by the people who were let out are prime examples of why the program should be eliminated.
Luisa Alves will ask the next question of Mary Fritz.
What specific proposals would you suggest that will address Connecticut's problem in terms of transportation? Would you support major investments in increased services for rail or bus commuter systems?
I voted against the wonderful busway. I voted for the amendment that was put up by a Republican to eliminate the busway. I found it ludicrous that they're building this busway from New Britain to Hartford and don't have any parking spaces for the people to leave their cars in New Britain. Additionally, all of a sudden, the towns along that busway realized the impact it was going to have on them as they started to lose their properties. Why didn't they scream and holler from the beginning? I think rail transportation is what we're going to be facing. I know we're looking at a high-speed rail coming through Wallingford. It's phenomenally expensive. I think in the long run, what we really need to do is to take care of the roads we have and make sure that they are safe for people and no more potholes or any one of these sinkholes that we face every now and then on our highways.
Mary and I actually agree on this. The busway is an absolute waste of money. There is mass transit that needs some work. If you're a commuter out of Fairfield County into New York, by the time you get into Stamford and Greenwich, you're standing on the trains. It's the one area where mass transit does work. The other thing we should look at is if you look around town, in our towns, we have buses, Connecticut Transit that runs buses, and if you watch, almost nobody's on them. I think that has to be looked at. And in some cases, it is important to have busways, and maybe what we do is go down to a mini bus instead of a full bus and save the money that way. It's at least something I would look at.
Denise Perez will ask the next question of Guy Darter.
What specific proposals do you have to make our state and our communities more energy efficient? Would you advocate green technology or a return to nuclear power plants as a solution?
I think part of our problem with the energy here in the state is we do have an extremely high cost. We also tax it in a lot of ways. I would look at nuclear to come back. Green energy is absolutely something in the future, but I think it's a ways away. I think there's a lot we can do to help ourselves, and it doesn't necessarily, it's the way it's regulated. And I would really look at the states that do a phenomenal job of keeping the electric rates down and see what they do and that we can adopt to keep our electric rates down too.
I thank God every day I live in the town of Wallingford, because as we all know, we have our own electric company and we have the cheapest rates around. And what we tried to do in the past session, what the Energy Committee tried to do, they tried to make us do redundant work in Wallingford and all of the CMEC towns in terms of taking care of the wires, taking care of the poles, taking care of the trees. But I put in, not an amendment, but when the bill came before the House, I stood and went through legislative privilege and asked specifically if in fact the intent was to duplicate, making Wallingford do things over and over again like CLMP was going to do. And that was unanimous. It was not a problem. There were 14 legislators in the House that were affected and would have been affected by that energy bill. Personally, I think we need to look at turbines.
Thank you. The next question is from Russell Blair to Mary Fritz.
Something other candidates have said across the state is when they talk to business owners, they say they have job openings, but they can't find the employees that are trained in that position, whether it's technology or manufacturing, fields like that. Would you propose the state do anything to try to marry those job openings with people that are graduating from high school and college?
Sorry.
No, it's Mary.
I'd be happy to marry those things. As you know, Russell, I'm the one that made sure that the vocational technical schools did not be sent to their towns. Like, could you see Wilcox Tech being run by the city of Meriden? No offense, but the Wilcox Tech scores are 30 points higher than the Meriden scores on the test. There is movement to do that. There is movement in terms of they've created a whole new board for the VOTEC schools that is singularly for the VOTEC schools. We have to get manufacturers involved, and some of them are on this board, which is a good step forward. Additionally, when you go into the schools, you find out that the machinery is not computerized like it is out in the workplace. And what we have to do is to establish that there will be no liability for manufacturers who bring the students in to work in their plants either as interns or as students whereby they would guide them in using these machines.
It is imperative that our community colleges, our technical schools, and our high school prepare the students for the jobs that we have open. I'm a member of SMA, which is Smaller Manufacturers Association over in Wallingford, in Waterbury, and they went years ago, they went over to Caner Tech, and most of them over there are metal manufacturers, and they went over there and they spoke about the curriculum that they needed to take their students and hire them. And they've adjusted their curriculum so that when they come out of school, they have a job in that field. And that's really what we need to do more of on a fairly consistent basis.
Luisa Alves will ask the next question of Guy Darter.
The state of Connecticut has pension obligations that are unfunded and in danger of not being able to pay its retirees in the future. What do you propose to do to remedy this situation?
The problem with unfunded pension obligations is a serious problem, and unfortunately it's not going to go away anytime soon. The base of the problem is not is the budget itself. We're looking at a budget again this year that we have heard numbers anywhere from $30 million to $100 million that we're going to be short this year in our budget. When you're short that much in your operating budget, you cannot afford your obligations. One thing that the state really needs to do and be serious about is working on generally accepted accounting principles. Using GAAP makes it that you can't fudge the numbers, and that's what we do. We borrow from Peter, we to pay funds, we move money around, we sort of wink and nod at our collections, and we postpone some of our expenses. We have no accountability. If the state ran their budget the way a business has to run a budget, it would be an eye-opener to see what kind of financial shape the state's in. It is in horrible, horrible shape. And I don't see us in the future going anywhere except for down unless we make fundamental changes on how we deal with our budget issues.
The budget deficit is 27 million, which is a significant decrease from the 3.4 billion it was 2 years ago. Additionally, what we need to do, we do have the GAP principles. We have passed the law regarding the GAP principles. The problem is the program is very, very expensive to put into place, and that's where we're held back right now. It's the lack of money.
Denise Perez will ask the next question of Mary Fritz.
What is your plan to attract new businesses to Connecticut and retain the current businesses that reside in our state?
In 2011, we passed a jobs bill. In 2012, we passed a jobs bill. In 2011, because of that jobs bill, 55,000 new jobs were either created or retained. With the 2012 jobs bill, 88,000 jobs were either retained or created. I think we're on the right track. We also have become very involved with the angel investors, which are wealthy people who will invest their money with startup companies in the state. We have several startup companies here in Wallingford, and they're doing very, very well. In return, the state gives a tax credit to the person who invests in the startup company.
To start off with, if you were watching the news tonight, it's always nice to throw out the number of 88,000 new jobs, but they forget to tell you how many they've lost. On the news tonight, they announced that net, at the end of the day, so far this year, we've increased by 1,900 jobs. It's not working. It's not working. As a businessman, it is nice. It is good. There's been some programs that have definitely helped the business community out. But we have a tendency to forget that if you're helping us out in the business community, you can't tax us to death on the other end. That just drives us back out of business.
Russell Blair will ask the next question of Guy Darter.
Guy, what are your thoughts on Governor Malloy's First Five initiative, where businesses are given either loans or grants to grow their companies, to add more employees, or to establish a new headquarters, things like that?
I think it's probably the worst decision yet. It goes and it brings in companies for a short period of time, or at an extremely high cost to do business in the state. They come in, they move around. We really haven't seen any great success out of it. I mean, everybody taunts Jackson Labs. Jackson Labs they have 10 years to come up with the amount of people to be employed at a huge dollar per employee. And really, they can hire them in the 9th year, fire them in the 11th, and keep all the money. It's a poor program. It's poorly sought out. There are others that has happened this year that have worked very well. The one where they've given small businesses matching grants for equipment or for projects is an excellent program. It has worked well, and I think that is the type of business that you want to bring in. The major corporations will come for a short period of time, and then they will leave. Thank you.
Jackson Labs, regardless of what my opponent says, their potential is 6,800 jobs. In addition to that, they have 3 Connecticut companies that are doing the work. One is White Turner is going to be the construction company out of New Haven. Gil Bain is going to be the project manager out of Glastonbury. The other one is Centerbrook Architects, who are going to be the architects for the Jackson Labs. And what we have going in the state of Connecticut is a huge bioscience medical entity or cluster. And this just adds to it, and it makes us special in the scheme of things with the rest of the states around us.
Lisa Alves will ask the next question of Mary Fritz.
If elected, how will you make Connecticut more affordable for young people who are recent graduates of college to live and work in the state?
There is a program that was started some time ago, but it hasn't spread throughout the state. But what it was is really to live here and stay here. And they started it in Hartford to encourage young singles to be in the city and to be able to work there and live there and hopefully stay there. And it seems to be working, but it's still very small. And as usual, the money has dissipated, so I don't think it's going to be growing anytime soon.
The problem with these pilot programs or small programs is they're a subsidy. You're getting subsidized to live in a certain location or subsidized to come and do a certain thing. It's not a long-term fix. It's putting Band-Aids on our problems. Our problems are that we're taxed too much. Okay? Our cost of living here is too high. Our cost of doing business here is too high. Until you bring businesses in, and you bring them in by making them the best state in the area. When we're one of the worst states to do business in and considered the worst state to business friendly, you got to change that attitude. We got to be better than Rhode Island, better than Massachusetts, and better than New York. We got to be the haven that everybody wants to come to. That's how you get the cost of living down. That's how you get jobs that pay more and help out with everybody in the state, not just the young people.
Denise Perez will ask the next question of Guy Darter.
How do you plan to fortify education programs to better equip Connecticut's young people to compete in an incredibly competitive job market?
It's fairly simple. I would let the towns, the cities, have more control over their programs and have less of the state dictating. The state dictates as a one package fits all, and that's not the case. The problems here in Wallingford are much different than the problems there are in Hartford or Bridgeport. Each of the towns have to be able to deal with their own problems their own way and have the flexibility to do it. A top-down government is not the way to run a government. It's really a bottom-up government where the towns and the city control the education and make it work for them. The other thing I would do for education is I would absolutely eliminate tenure. It is ridiculous that you can keep your job just because you showed up for work. Gotta go. It's the only way to get rid of bad teachers in the state on a fairly easy basis. Definitely, it's a program that is way past its prime.
Mary?
It's unfortunate that my opponent is using Governor Malloy's speech on opening day when he said that you just had to show up if you were a teacher. Well, unfortunately, tenure is not that easy. You have to have 30 credits or your master's before you even get to the point of tenure. Also, you have to have taught 5 years. Additionally, you have to remember now you're a brand new teacher and you're taking courses and you have God knows how many subjects you have to teach. And the job isn't from 8 to 3 or 8 to 4 or 9 to 3. Remember, you have homework just like your students. Tenure is a good thing. What the reform bill was establish huge or different kinds of evaluations that will take place. They will not only evaluate the teachers, they will evaluate the administrators, which is about time. And this will be uniform, which is a good thing.
Russell Blair will ask the next question of Mary Fritz.
Cheshire has prisons, and they get payments through the state through the payment in lieu of taxes program, and those payments were supposed to be funded at 100%. I think it's in the 50s now, and it's never been at that point. If reelected, what will you do to try to get Cheshire the money that they were promised years ago?
As you know, Russell, even though you weren't around then, the pilot program was something that I worked with a legislator from Windsor Locks, because Cheshire picked up 2 brand new prisons. It was a huge expansion program, and we were able to convince Governor O'Neill that they needed to pay in lieu of taxes at 100% because of this expansion. At the time, what was put into the law was that it was not only prison buildings, but it was also the land, because Cheshire loses 300 acres on Route 10, which is absolutely unconscionable. Now we have a new dimension going on where now they're saying, well, we closed Webster, so it's not a prison anymore. And we are closing Maloney, but Maloney is still used by corrections. So they're going to try and reduce the pilot by $200,000 more. My plan is to put together the prison caucus again, which I've done in the past, because if it's happening to Cheshire, it's going to happen to Mansfield because they closed the prison. And I'm going back to the law, which said it deals with the land.
the money coming from the state for the prisons is absolutely a hardship for the town of Cheshire. And it's something that was definitely set up, and it should be adhered to. It's not something where the governor or the administration says, you know what, we're not going to pay it to you, and too bad, you got to figure it out. There's other problems with our prison. Right now, we're in the middle of a referendum to upgrade the sewer system, their sewer plant in our town. And right now, it's figured that the prison use about 25% of the affluent goes through. They're unwilling at this moment to pay for any of the upgrade. Now, we did get a $7 million grant, but it surely doesn't pay 25% of the cost of the plant. And that needs to be addressed, and it should be addressed on an ongoing basis.
Luisa Alves will ask the next question of Guy Darter.
What specific project or issue do you want to address that would target the towns you represent? Would it cost the state any money to address a specific concern, and why is this issue project so important?
I think the issues I have will really will help the towns, but also help everybody else. I think first thing I want to do is I want to eliminate the state income tax on senior Social Security payments. This is ridiculous. Truthfully, it's immoral that we're taxing senior citizens. And it's $63 million in total is what it's roughly about. It could easily be made up by, if you look at the welfare program and also look at the Medicare and also the workman's comp claims that are fraudulent that we don't go after. We have a lot of fraud in those programs. They all need to be cleaned up. But we shouldn't be doing this on the back of the seniors in our towns. It does hurt them. The costs keep on going up, and we give them no relief. We've been rated the worst state in the union to retire in. That's pretty bad.
If we were to follow what my opponent says, we are talking about $61 million that would be added to the $27 million deficit. In terms of what I would do for my towns, it's what I always do. People know that they can call me any time of the day or the night. They also know if they have problems, they can show up at my door, and I'll bring them in the kitchen, usually on Saturday mornings at 11. I've done this many, many times over the years, or else I'll come to your home. This is what I'm about. I'm about taking care of the people I represent. In terms of projects, it will depend on what my towns ask for, because that's who I work for.
Denise Perez will start the last round. Her question is to Mary Fritz.
Because state union workers are a vital part of any budget, explain how you would tell union leadership that they must take less in pay and benefits in order to balance the state budget.
The state unions have a freeze on their pay for the next 2 years. They've gone to the table and they've come back. And one of the things that we have been successful in through negotiation with the unions was, in fact, the pharmaceutical plan that was put in place. We're saving the state millions of dollars collectively. The union, everybody says we have too many state workers until somebody has a problem and there's nobody there to answer, or the highways aren't getting plowed quick enough, or somebody doesn't like how one road is constructed. Everybody wants to get rid of state workers, but at the end of the day, if there aren't enough people to answer the questions, we're all going to suffer.
In many cases, I think over the last 2 years with the Malloy administration, the state workers have really taken a beating. At least in the press, they've been demonized in many cases. And that's not the way you get workers to work better for you and harder for you, and be willing to take sacrifices and cuts to help the budget out. I do believe there's too many workers in the state. I believe we have a lot more workers than we need. I think we need to readjust, go through and reorganize the departments, and there are get rid of the positions that need to be get rid of. I'm not looking at layoffs. I'm talking about moving people around. We have many people that leave. Maybe a state freeze would help to start some of that off. But the workers come to work. They work hard. We should be proud that they do what they do. but the overall program needs to be adjusted so there are, we have the efficiencies that we use in business that we can use also in government.
Russell Blair will ask the next question of Guy Darter.
What are some proposals that you would put forward to ease the burden on seniors who are living on a fixed income and are struggling in this economic time?
The two I've been running on, number one is to eliminate the income tax on the Social Security payments to seniors. And the second thing would be to bring back the property tax credit to $500 instead of the $300 of that. I know Mary keeps on saying there's no money in the budget to do that. I look at it from a different perspective. I think we do what we're supposed to do and help the seniors and look at what the purpose of government is and sort of redefine where we've been and start going back and saying, where can we make cuts? Where can we start being more efficient? I mean, welfare fraud, unemployment fraud, it's rampant. And it really, that's some areas you need to address. Just throw up your hands and says, oh my God, with 34 million in the hole, we can't do anything about anything. It's really a defeatist attitude. And if I go to Harvard, that is not what the attitude I will bring.
Mary?
I would hope my opponent is not saying that I have a defeatist attitude, because I never have. There isn't any problem I've ever looked at that I considered too big or not able to be taken care of. And that's how I operate. I've taken very good care of the seniors over my terms in office. Look at the money I brought back for the Wallingford Senior Center, $500,000. When Cheshire was rebuilding its senior center, I got them $250,000. I look at money coming back for projects to towns, not as spending foolishly. I look at it as your tax dollars coming home to your town through me.
Luisa Alves will ask the last question of Mary Fritz.
What would you do to get the state of Connecticut to more adequately fund education here in Wallingford?
Education was increased last year under the reform bill. The education cost-sharing formula was increased. Will it stay? I'm not sure, but if it's level funded, it will work. We've created a whole different scenario with the education reform bill, which is actually going after what they call the achievement gap. One of the things we're doing is looking at reading assessment, whereby every student is going to have to be assessed, but it's only in our poorer communities, the priority school districts. I wish we could take that reading assessment program and put it in every school system like we did originally when we started the mastery tests, because then we wouldn't be worrying about people in high school not being able to read. Once you get to middle school, then if the student still has to learn to read, you've got a problem, because they are very uncomfortable, they are embarrassed, and if you can't read, then you're never going to be able to get educated.
The best thing we can do for our local schools, Wallingford schools, is let Wallingford run our school systems without such a heavy hand from the state. And again, if we have a mandate that comes down from the state should fund it. It shouldn't be dropped onto the towns, and then we have some mandates that come down. They're funded for a couple of years. The funding goes away and the mandate stays. Poor way of running it. Makes it very hard for the town to run the school. We spend an awful lot of time doing a lot of administrative work and not spending enough time with the teachers teaching.
Thank you. That concludes the question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes to make closing statements. Ms. Fritz, will you begin?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Wallingford community women for putting this on. I know it hasn't been easy, but we all tried to pitch in and get things done. I've had the privilege of representing the towns of Cheshire and Wallingford for 14 terms. I know I probably should have gone for term limits, but I don't believe in that. I believe that you bring your brain to work when you go to the legislature. And it may seem that we're a part-time legislature. We're not. just because they banged the gavel on the last night of the session, let me tell you, people's problems don't go away. The next morning, the phone is ringing again because somebody else has a problem, whether they need medicine, whether they need help because their husband is abusing them. Those are things that you do 24/7, 12 months of the year. So we may be part-time in some respects, but actually we're full-time. My job has always been to take care of the people who sent me to Hartford. I still maintain that. I've done a lot of wonderful things for people in Wallingford and in Cheshire, and I'm very proud of that. My experience gives me the ability to go across the aisle and say, look, this is going to be good. Let's see if we can work it out. And I do that on a regular basis. This is what I like to do. I'm a problem solver. My opponent doesn't have this kind of experience. My opponent says we spend too much. My opponent in 8 years got $824,000 in contracts from the state. My opponent just got a grant of $42,500 in the Jobs Express bill. Now, I guess the state shouldn't have spent that money. I hope you'll vote for me on November 6th. I'm always there for you.
Mr. Darter?
Thank you very much for having me tonight. I think you got to go back and you got to look 28, 30 years ago. This state was a magnificent state. It was prosperous. It was growing. Businesses were moving in. Taxes were low. People were being taken care of. Well, we're 30 years later. We're considered the worst state in the union to retire in. We have one of the highest electric costs. We have one of the highest gas taxes. CBI says that we're the fourth worst state to do business in. We've been rated as legislators up there that we have just been the worst state in the union. We've gone from being a very good state 30 years ago, and basically under Democratic rule in the legislature, and Mary Fritz being part of the Democratic rule, has drove it into the ground. We are so far under, it's incredible. They talk about GAP and they talk about, it's too expensive to institute. The reason it's too expensive to institute is the simple fact that if you change the rules and you ran by GAP, you couldn't hide from the truth. And the truth is frightening of what this state financially is truly in. What I bring when I go to Hartford is I bring my business experience. Every day I go and I have to work and I have to solve problems and I have to make adjustments and I have to deal with the extra taxes and fees that the state imposes on me. And it's true, I am a state contractor, and I do get state work. And in return, they get product from me and they get services from me. I do have a contract that under REL was suspended, because I do. Part of what I do is pens, pencils, and coffee cups. It was suspended under REL's administration. I was astounded that it ever came back. Truthfully, the state doesn't need coffee cups and pens and trinkets with their names on it when you're so far under. I would vote to eliminate my own contract because it is probably one of the frivolous things that we do spend. It's nice for me, it's nice for my business, but truthfully, as a taxpayer, sometimes I'm wondering why we're spending the money. As a legislator, I would look at it and say, absolutely, it is one that should be suspended. I was in favor of it when REL suspended it, and I was kind of surprised it was ever brought back. But it's more than that. It's my business experience. It's dealing day-to-day, growing businesses, figuring out ways. The Express program absolutely is one of the best ways to help small businesses. I took advantage of it. I've hired one employee because of it. I'm looking to hire a second employee by May of next year. It is what helps, but you need a business experience up there, not the same old, and we're driving into the ground. And truthfully, Mary, you've been part of the team up there that's driven in the ground, and sometimes I wonder how you sleep at night. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the 90th Assembly District segment of the 2012 Candidates Forum. On behalf of the Wallingford Community Women, I thank you for watching and remind you to vote on November 6th.